like the spring of 2020. And, I basically formulated a plan to do it in like 4 to 5 days. And I knew you had Jonathan Zaharik on, talking about an unsuccessful attempt at this before. And he was tossing out the moonshot idea of like 3.5 days, to do it unsupported, which I think is totally feasible actually. And we can talk, maybe as we go through the route, I can explain like kind of where I went wrong and or was slower than the ideal time. But I do think that it can be done in less than 4, in 3 sleeps, less than 4 complete days. And that was sort of my A goal going in, and my B goal was 5 days. And I had a sort of plan. I had 5 segments planned, and the intention going into it was I can do each of these 5 segments in about like 16 to 20 hours, and then sleep for like 4 to 8 hours each night, and then move on to the next segment. And so that was my fallback is like, okay, I can definitely do it in like 5 days, 4 sleeps. And then if I'm feeling really good, the last like 2 to 3 days, I can push that lack of sleep and push it down to 4 days or slightly below. That was my plan going in. And then I got injured again in like late spring, early summer of 2020. So I pushed back my FKT another year and ended up doing it in the 2021 season, which, I think turned out to be good for me because I was able to do like even more training and get even more experience. Mostly by this point, I was going out for like I was going out for long runs in the mountains, getting as just like much technical trails and vertical running as possible, like pretty much every weekend, which for me is like actually a bit of a challenge. I live in New Jersey where it's like pretty much pancake flat. I have to drive about at least an hour to 2 hours to get to any like decently steep trails. But I was doing that like once a week, pretty much every week, from like November 2020 through like the end of May, beginning of June of this year, which is when I stopped to kind of like taper for a few weeks before I attempted it. But yeah, sorry. So I know I've been rambling a bit, but I think that's kind of my training. And yeah, should I talk about the actual plan or?
Yeah, we'll get in. Well, yeah, we'll definitely get into it. No, this is great because you're being very thorough with with everything and what led you to this, and it seemed like it was a very gradual transition from running and hiking, and then maybe a little more combined, and then a little more combined, and now you're running bigger days, and it's like it just seems like it all kind of made sense. Your story was a nice flow to getting ultimately to going after this attempt. And it's interesting that you did most of your training elsewhere and then came up here for the actual attempt, because I so often in these FKT podcasts I hear that people came up here to do their training here for that, like in the place that they're actually hiking. So it's interesting to hear that from you. Then you made it happen wherever you were living in New Jersey, and it worked out. Yeah, hit me with like what you had for equipment. So what did you have? Yours is unsupported. So we've heard pretty much how you kind of prepared and your route and all this stuff. Your route came from earlier in your Cal Topo lifestyle there. So now with your gear, what did you have? What backpack, shoes? How big was the backpack? Take us through that whole breakdown of what you brought, because again, it's just you, so it's whatever you can carry. This is an unsupported attempt, so it's very different from a supported attempt.
For sure. Before I do, I just want to say that yeah, you're absolutely right. That like I did most of my training not in the Adirondacks, which is suboptimal for sure. Mainly that's just a choice of convenience for me. I live over 5-hour drive from Keene Valley. So it's, it's a big commitment to be able to get out there and just with my, balancing family life and grad school at the time, it just made more sense to like try to do as much of the training close to home as I could.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, and, no, and I do think that like lack of knowledge of the course definitely ultimately slowed me down. It's not that I necessarily made a bunch of wrong turns, because I think I had studied the Cal Topo map and like to such a degree that I hardly needed to navigate, but because I knew my way around, but just, the lack of knowledge of the terrain and like what to expect at every step of the way definitely, is a contributing factor. But okay, yeah. So gear, over as this progression, I made this progression towards like, from hiking and backpacking to more trail running and moving fast. The, kind of corresponding with that is moving light. And I definitely, started, it was again a gradual process of getting into ultralight backpacking and things like that. But so my total kit that I carried, the base weight is 11 pounds. So that's everything, basically my pack and everything that I didn't eat or drink or wear, was 11 pounds, which is not super light, but in the grand scheme of things. But
dude, my backpack at all times is like 35 pounds. So I hear that and I just say, holy mackerel, that is, and you're sleeping. Yeah. That is wild. I think, I mean, I guess in the ultralight world, maybe they'd say that's not light, but to me, I'm just like, wow, that's impressive. But yeah, continue.
I mean, it definitely took a lot of effort. It was hard to get it down to 11 pounds, I will say. And yeah, in the ultralight world, I think they don't really consider you a card carrying ultralighter unless your base weight is below 10 pounds.
Sure.
And again, that's not counting food and water,
yeah,
which I was carrying about 10 pounds of food and then up to about a liter of water at a time. So that's about 12 extra pounds. So my total pack weight was definitely over 20, but still pretty light.
Sure. Now let me ask you this real quick. Now there's two different approaches with ultralight and the ultralight crowd. There's the ultralight, ultra cheap crowd, and then there's the ultralight, very expensive crowd. So where do you fall? Because you could go ultralight and spend like $8, like Eric Schlimmer does, or you could go ultralight and spend like $800 because you get all these very high-end ultralight stuff. Where do you fall in that spectrum? Just out of curiosity.
That's a really fair question. I'm definitely, I think, somewhere in between. I didn't carry that much cheap stuff, although there are a few things. Mostly I will either omit or I bought like pretty nice, ultralight stuff. So let's go into it, right? So my shelter and sleep system, which is like the bulk of the weight. I had a Mountain Laurel Designs FKT bivy, it weighs 10 ounces. It's a fully waterproof bivy sack. So a bivy sack, for those who may not know, is just it's a sleeping bag cover basically. And and mine is fully waterproof. That's basically my tent. In case it rained, I would just like hunker down in the bivy sack. It's absolutely miserable being in a bivy sack when it's raining. I'll just throw that out there. Fortunately, I never had to, on this trip, I never had to like endure a night of thunderstorms in the bivy. But that weighs 10 ounces, which, if you think like that's completely replacing a tent. For 10 ounces. So, and it's fairly expensive. I forget exactly how much, but it's definitely like more than $200.
Okay, sure.
And yeah, so that's my tent essentially. And then I had a synthetic 50-degree ultralight quilt from Enlighten Equipment, which is a really great brand. I have several quilts made by them. But that's rated to 50-degree temperature, weighs 12 ounces. So again, that's light. That's honestly the one of the least ultralight things that I had, I would say. I struggled for a long time with how to make my sleep system even lighter, because I felt like the warmth was a little overkill for what I needed. Because I was planning to do the trip in the summer, right around the summer solstice, to maximize daylight. And it's very warm. If you're not up high, the overnight lows are usually like well above 50, I would say, for the most part, although it definitely can get colder. but yeah, so that was my quilt. I also carried, here's a cheap item for a sleeping pad. I just used one of those, $20, like the $20 foam pads that I cut up to just be about the length from my hip to my shoulder. And that weighs 6 ounces, which is about as light as any, $100 inflatable sleeping pad you can buy. So those are kind of the biggest items. Then my pack as well, which is sort of like not the most ultralight, but I was going for more functional. With this one, I used an Ultimate Direction fast pack, which is I have the 30-liter version. So it's, big for a running pack, but small for a backpacking pack. But the really nice thing about this style is that it's built like a running vest. So it has water bottle and food pockets up in the front, so you don't have to take the backpack off as often, which again is not so much saving weight but saving time, which is equivalent when you're doing an FKT. So I had an Ultimate Direction fast pack. That was my primary pack to carry the big stuff, and then I also had just a little running vest that weighed like 6 ounces to carry, that I would use when I would drop my big pack. So we'll probably get more into that, but the basic plan is to drop the big stuff, the sleeping stuff, the extra food, the big backpack in strategic locations, and then from there I would take just a really light day pack, run it and run as much as possible, and come back and pick up the big stuff and move it at strategic times.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. Sounds like a good strategy overall, and the same strategy that most people kind of employ when they're going after these unsupported FKTs. Yes,
although I think we'll get to this, but I definitely took a bit of a bolder strategy along that line.
Okay,
we'll get to that.
Sure,
but yeah, the one other thing I wanted to throw is a lot of that pack weight is coming from the bear canister, right? So Adirondack High Peaks,
yes,
got to carry the bear canister. It's got to be the solid, I forget what you call it, but not the bear vault, because the bears can open the bear canisters, right? So you got to carry like the solid opaque bear canister.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had like the regular old like Garcia canister. It's like, I forget the volume. It's like maybe 7 or 10 liter volume. It weighs over 2.5 pounds. So that is the least ultralight thing that I carried.
Absolutely.
But it was out of necessity.
Yeah, and there's no real way to ultralight that item, unfortunately. Yep. But that brings us to what you had inside it. Food. Take us through.
Yeah. So I had that thing absolutely stuffed. I was planning for 5 days, and I'd done recently big day efforts of just single day, like up to 12, 16 hours, and I sort of had a decent idea for like how much food I needed for that, for during the day, but I severely underestimated how much food I would need sort of to recover in between sort of to account for like when I finish my big day hike and then I go home and I eat a Chipotle burrito and then like, I don't even know, an extra like 2,000 calories on top of that. Right. But anyway, I had about 4,000 calories per day, for multiplied by 5 days. But
hold on, let me pause you right there.
Yeah.
Because I know Zaharic Jonathan is going to listen to this episode. Say it again. How many calories did you have per day?
Yeah,
4,000.
Just over 4,000 per day.
Jonathan and I have talked extensively about this, how I have rag on him for not having nearly the right amount of calories. I'm sure he'll chuckle as he listens to this, but yeah, continue.
And this, we will get to this in the story, but it comes back to bite me. Sure.
Okay. Now Jonathan's laughing at me as he listens to this, but okay, continue.
No, because so this was not enough food, not nearly enough food. I don't know. I'm actually now confused. James, would Jonathan want to carry significantly less or more than this?
No,
Because
less. He would
wow,
carry much less calories, and I was always saying, dude,